The dining hall of Outpost S-17 was a cacophony of sound and motion, boots clanging against steel floors, chairs scraping as soldiers jockeyed for seats, and the sharp metallic voices of the base's AI servers announcing meal selections that barely resembled food. Corporal Anders slumped at a corner table with his squad, lazily stabbing at a plate of protein cubes and rehydrated greens. Across from him, Private Kim was deep into a heated discussion about how to cheat at galactic chess without tripping the training AI. Anders wasn't paying attention. His focus was elsewhere. Someone was staring at him. He didn't know how he knew. Call it soldier's instinct, maybe. But the feeling was undeniable. His skin prickled, a sensation that crawled up his spine like an itch he couldn't reach. He dropped his fork with a clang and looked up. She was standing on the far side of the hall, near the entrance, her silver-toned skin catching the harsh overhead lights. Her posture was rigid, hands clasped behind her back, as though she were a statue carved from the stars themselves. Her eyes, deep and shimmering with a blend of colors that seemed impossible, violet, gold, and shades of shifting blue, were locked on him. Anders blinked. Twice. Hey, Kim, he muttered, not breaking eye contact. You see that? Kim looked up from his cube of gelatinized mystery dessert. See what? That Vaynari over there, Anders said, nodding toward her. She's staring at me like I owe her credits or something. Kim squinted, finally spotting the alien woman. Oh, her. Yeah, she's been standing there for a while. I thought maybe you two knew each other. Not a chance, Anders said. He leaned back in his chair, forcing himself to sound casual. Pretty sure I'd remember a face like that. Not a lot of Vaynari hanging around here, let alone ones that look like they walked out of a cosmic fashion show. Kim snorted. Maybe she's into the scruffy human look. You've got that whole forgot to shave this morning vibe going for you. Thanks, Kim. Real helpful. But the woman didn't move. She didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't even glance away. Her gaze was unyielding, as though she were studying him, dissecting him with her mind. Anders shifted in his seat, suddenly hyper-aware of the standard-issue gray uniform that always seemed a size too tight. Okay, seriously, this is weird. What's her deal? Kim shrugged, popping another bite of dessert into his mouth. Why don't you go ask her? Yeah, no thanks. I've got enough weird in my life without adding alien stalkers to the list. As if on cue, one of their squad mates, a stocky sergeant named Mahoney, joined the conversation, dropping his tray onto the table with a clang. What are we talking about? Anders' love life or, the tragic lack thereof? Close, Kim said, smirking. We're discussing the Vaynari woman who's been staring at him for like 5 solid minutes. Mahoney turned, spotted her immediately and whistled low. Well, well, looks like you've got a fan, Anders. What did you do? Save her planet in a past life? Very funny, Anders said, voice dripping with sarcasm. Pretty sure the last time I interacted with a Vaynari, it involved an argument over docking protocols. Didn't exactly end with a handshake. Mahoney grinned. Maybe she's here to settle the score. Anders groaned, rubbing the back of his neck. You guys are the worst. The Vaynari finally moved. With the fluid grace of her kind, she turned sharply on her heel and strode out of the dining hall. Well, there goes your chance, Kim said, mock disappointment in his voice. You could have at least said hi. Yeah, sure, Anders said, standing and grabbing his tray. Next time I'll just walk up and say, Hi, I'm Anders, and I have no idea why you're staring at me like I stole your starship. That'll go over great. The incident should have faded from his mind as quickly as it happened. But it didn't. Later that evening, as Anders cleaned his gear in the barracks, he caught himself glancing over his shoulder more than once. The memory of her unrelenting stare gnawed at him, persistent and irritating, like an itch he couldn't scratch. Still thinking about her? Anders jumped, nearly dropping the plasma rifle he'd been dismantling. He turned to see Kim leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. No, Anders lied. Kim smirked. You're a terrible liar, man. Come on, just admit it. She got under your skin. Anders sighed, setting the rifle parts aside. It's not that, it's just... I've never seen someone look at me like that before. It wasn't just staring, it was like she knew me, like she was trying to figure me out. Maybe she did know you, Kim said. Anders laughed, a short, bitter sound. Doubt it. The only Vaynari I've met were bureaucrats and scientists. Definitely not her type. Kim raised an eyebrow. Her type? You know what I mean, Anders said, waving him off. Before Kim could press further, the barracks door hissed open. And there she was. The Vaynari woman stepped inside, her movements deliberate, her gaze once again fixed squarely on Anders. Her presence silenced the room instantly. Even the normally rowdy squad members fell into a stunned hush. Anders felt his throat tighten. He scrambled to his feet, words tumbling out before he could stop them. Hi, can I help you? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes, those swirling galaxies, seemed to bore straight through him. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and melodic, carrying an accent that twisted the syllables of his name in an oddly familiar way. Do you remember me? Anders blinked, the words hitting him like a thunderclap. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. He hesitated, forcing a nervous chuckle. Sorry, I think you've got the wrong guy. I don't remember meeting any Vaynari before. Her expression didn't change. No, she said softly, almost to herself. You wouldn't. Anders felt a chill creep down his spine. He glanced at Kim, who looked just as baffled as he felt. Okay, Anders said, trying to inject some levity into the situation. This is getting a little weird. Can we maybe start with names? Mine's Anders. What's yours? The Vaynari tilted her head, as though studying him from a new angle. Sienna, she said. Sienna, Anders repeated, trying to keep his tone light. Great. Nice to meet you, Sienna. Now, care to explain why you're looking at me like I owe you money? A faint smile tugged at the corners of her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. It's not money you owe me, human, she said. It's something much more important. The humor evaporated from the room, leaving Anders with nothing but the unsettling weight of her words and the undeniable feeling that she was right. Anders wasn't used to silence. Not here. Not in the barracks where noise was the natural state of things. Soldiers joked, laughed, cursed, argued, sometimes all at once. But now, with Sienna standing in front of him, the entire room seemed frozen. Even the usually oblivious cleaning drone in the corner had stopped mid-sweep, as though it too was waiting for Anders's response. He cleared his throat, forcing a grin he didn't feel. So, when you say I owe you something more important than money, you're not talking about galactic chess tips, right? No response. Sienna's eyes, those damned swirling eyes, remained fixed on him, her expression inscrutable. The only thing Anders could read in her face was intensity and maybe a touch of sadness. Kim, bless him, decided to break the tension. Hey, Anders, maybe she's here to reclaim the last shred of dignity you lost at the base karaoke night. Laughter rippled through the barracks, and Anders seized the moment to exhale. Good one, Kim. Maybe next time I'll invite you up to butcher a song with me. I'd rather face the Nornex unarmed, Kim shot back. The joke worked, at least partially. The soldiers shifted, the energy in the room loosening just enough to remind Anders that he wasn't trapped in a standoff with an alien woman who apparently knew more about him than he did. He turned back to her, forcing another smile. Listen, Sienna, I appreciate the dramatic entrance, but I think there's been some kind of mistake. I don't know you, and I'm pretty sure you don't know me. Her head tilted slightly, a movement so precise it was almost mechanical. You don't remember me, she said again, her voice softer this time. Right, Anders said, trying to sound casual. That's kind of the problem. But hey, maybe if you give me a hint, like where we supposedly met. Was it a party? A diplomatic thing? Please tell me it wasn't karaoke night. Her lips twitched, just the faintest hint of a smile, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. It wasn't here, she said. It wasn't even you. That brought him up short. Come again? Sienna stepped closer, her movement smooth and deliberate. Anders resisted the urge to step back. She was taller than him by at least half a foot, her presence commanding in a way that felt almost predatory. It was your father, she said, her voice steady, yet carrying an undercurrent of something deeper. I knew your father, Anders. Anders blinked, the words taking a moment to register. When they did, his gut reaction was disbelief. He snorted, shaking his head. Okay, now I know you've got the wrong guy. My dad? He died when I was 6. Didn't exactly have time to go gallivanting around the galaxy making alien friends. He spoke of you, Sienna said, undeterred. Often. He carried a photograph, worn, folded, but always with him. A boy, no older than 6. His name was Anders. The word struck like a hammer, a force so sudden and unexpected that Anders couldn't breathe for a moment. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in as her words echoed in his head. Kim, sensing the shift, stepped forward. Whoa, okay, let's all take a breath here. Anders, you good? Anders forced himself to nod, though his throat felt like sandpaper. Yeah, fine, just fine. He wasn't fine. The rest of the barracks faded into background noise as Sienna began to speak. Her voice was calm, measured, as though recounting a memory that had been carefully preserved. Your father and I fought together during the Nornex campaigns, she said. It was a time of desperation, alliances forged not by trust but by necessity. The Vaynari were reluctant to involve ourselves in human conflicts, but the swarm threatened us all. Your father was one of the few humans who understood what was at stake. Anders blinked, trying to process her words. You're saying my dad fought the Nornex? As in, the bug things that nearly wiped out half the outer colonies? That was, what, 20 years ago? 23, Sienna corrected, her tone sharp but not unkind. He was part of an allied strike team tasked with sabotaging a Nornex hive ship. It was a mission with little chance of survival. Your father knew this, and yet he volunteered. Anders let out a low whistle, trying to mask his growing discomfort. Well, that's heroic, I guess, but I'm still not seeing how I fit into this story. I was a kid. I didn't even know he was fighting in a war. Sienna's expression softened, and for the first time, Anders saw something more than intensity in her eyes. There was pain there, too. He didn't want you to know, she said. He wanted to protect you. Even in the darkest moments, his thoughts were of you. Anders opened his mouth, a sarcastic retort on the tip of his tongue, but it died before he could say it. Instead, he asked, Why are you telling me this? Why now? Sienna hesitated, her gaze flickering briefly to the floor. When she looked back at him, there was a vulnerability in her expression that hadn't been there before. Because he saved my life, she said quietly. And I made a promise to him. A promise that I would find you, if I survived. The room was so quiet you could have heard a dust mote land. Anders's squad, usually a blur of activity and noise, was frozen, watching the exchange like spectators at a theater. Anders finally broke the silence, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to his own ears. Wow, okay, that's a lot to take in. My dad, the war hero, you, the grateful alien, and me, the guy who didn't even know his dad's favorite food, let alone that he was fighting space bugs. Great story, really compelling. Kim winced. Anders? No, seriously, Anders said, throwing up his hands. This is amazing. You should write a book or something. Get it serialized. Call it Space Dad the Saga. Sienna's expression didn't change, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes. Disappointment, maybe. I understand this is difficult for you, she said. Oh, do you? Anders shot back. Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I just got hit with a comet of information I didn't ask for. Anders, Kim said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. He shrugged it off, running a hand through his hair. Look, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish here, but I'm not the guy you're looking for. My dad's dead. He's been dead for 2 decades. Whatever promise you made, it doesn't matter anymore. Sienna didn't flinch. It matters to me. Her words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Anders stared at her, his jaw clenched. For a moment, he looked like he might argue further. But then, without another word, he turned and walked out of the barracks. Behind him, Sienna stood motionless, her gaze following him until he disappeared from sight. Kim sighed, glancing at her. He'll come around. He just needs some time to process. Humans are weird like that. Sienna didn't reply, but deep down she hoped he was right. Anders spent the next several hours in a state of restless denial. He told himself he wasn't avoiding Sienna, that he just happened to be inspecting equipment in the armory, triple-checking inventory logs, and recalibrating his HUD interface all in one evening. Sure, maybe he worked a little longer than usual. Maybe he even lingered in the maintenance bay after his tasks were done, staring blankly at a holomap of the sector, while the AI occasionally chirped at him to Rest to maintain optimal performance. But avoiding her? That wasn't his style. Absolutely not. Still, the memory of her words refused to leave him alone. She claimed to have known his father. She claimed his dad was some kind of war hero, a man who'd fought alongside aliens in a desperate battle to save the galaxy. It sounded more like a pulp novel plot than a piece of his family history. Anders let out a groan and slumped against the wall, his forehead resting on the cool, brushed metal. "Why does this stuff always happen to me?" he muttered. "Statistically speaking," said a disembodied voice, "it is not always happening to you." Anders nearly jumped out of his skin. He spun around to see a cleaning drone hovering in the doorway, its spherical body polished to an irritating shine. The drone's single photoreceptor glowed a soft green. "Thanks, Rex," Anders said dryly. "Just what I needed. Life advice from a glorified vacuum cleaner." "I am a robotic extrapolation assistant," the drone corrected in its chipper, synthesized voice. "And according to my analysis, you exhibit a recurring pattern of engaging in high-stress scenarios due to poor decision-making and social mismanagement." Anders threw up his hands. "Great. My own personal life coach. You taking appointments?" "Negative," Rex replied. "However, I suggest addressing your stress directly. Avoidance is correlated with suboptimal outcomes." "I'm not avoiding anything," Anders snapped, before muttering under his breath. "Why does everyone think I'm avoiding something? Probability suggests it is because you are." Before Anders could come up with a retort, the drone zipped away, presumably to deliver its unsolicited wisdom to another unsuspecting victim. He shook his head, muttering, "Damn robot." Anders eventually wandered back to the barracks. The place was quieter now, most of his squad either asleep or off on night shifts. He moved to his bunk and flopped down, staring at the ceiling. He didn't want to admit it, but the thing gnawing at him wasn't just Siena's cryptic story. It was the photo she'd mentioned, the idea of his father, a man he barely remembered, carrying a picture of him into a war zone. It stirred something he couldn't quite name. For years, Anders had avoided thinking about his dad. There wasn't much to think about, really. A handful of fragmented memories, the scratchy texture of his uniform, the smell of engine grease, the way he'd ruffle Anders' hair when he came home from work, and then he was gone, like a star winking out in the night sky. Anders sighed. "I should have asked her more," he admitted quietly. "I should have." A shadow moved at the edge of his vision, and he bolted upright. Sienna stood at the foot of his bunk, silent as a specter. Her luminous eyes caught the faint light from the barracks' overhead panels, giving them an almost ethereal glow. "Stars above," Anders yelped, clutching his chest. "Can you not sneak up on people like that?" "I knocked," Sienna said calmly. "No, you didn't." Her head tilted slightly. "I did. Twice." Anders groaned, running a hand down his face. "Fine, whatever. What do you want?" "I want to talk," she said, her tone steady. "Well, it's late, and I was just about to—" "You were not about to sleep," Sienna interrupted. "Your heart rate suggests agitation, not restfulness." Anders blinked. "You're tracking my heart rate now? Great. That's not creepy at all." Ignoring his sarcasm, Sienna stepped closer. "You have questions," she said, "and I have answers, if you are willing to listen." Anders opened his mouth to argue, but stopped himself. She wasn't wrong. "Fine," he said, swinging his legs over the edge of the bunk. "But if this turns into some kind of alien therapy session, I'm out." Sienna inclined her head, the faintest hint of amusement crossing her features. They moved to a quieter corner of the barracks, away from prying ears. Sienna leaned against a support pillar, her posture relaxed, but her gaze unwavering. "I owe you an explanation," she began. "You think?" Anders muttered. Sienna ignored him. "Your father, Doran Anders, was more than a soldier. He was a strategist, a leader. When the Allied strike team was formed, he volunteered not because he was ordered to, but because he believed the mission mattered. He believed the swarm had to be stopped." Anders frowned. Why would he volunteer for a suicide mission? He had a family. Sienna's gaze softened. Because of that family. He believed that if he didn't fight, you would grow up in a galaxy ruled by the Nornex. He wanted something better for you. Anders swallowed hard, the lump in his throat making it difficult to respond. "I fought beside him," Sienna continued. "He was remarkable for a human. Gee, thanks, Anders said dryly. Ciena's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile. He earned the respect of my people. That is not easily done. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable, filled with the weight of unspoken memories. Finally, Anders asked, "And the photo?" "You said he carried a picture of me?" Ciena nodded. "He showed it to me once, during a quiet moment between battles. He said it reminded him why he fought. He spoke of you with pride." Anders looked away, his chest tightening. He didn't know how to reconcile the image of the man Ciena described with the faint, fading memories of his own father. "Why didn't I know any of this?" he asked quietly. "Perhaps he didn't want you to," Ciena said. "Perhaps he believed you would be safer not knowing." Anders let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, well, look how that turned out. I ended up in the military anyway." "Perhaps he would be proud of that," Ciena said. Anders looked at her, his expression a mix of skepticism and something softer. "You really believe that?" "I do," she said simply. For the first time since this whole mess started, Anders felt a flicker of something he couldn't quite name. Connection, maybe. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "if you're going to stick around, you'd better get used to humans. We're messy, loud, and terrible at expressing feelings." Ciena tilted her head, considering. "Then it seems I have much to learn." Anders smirked. "Don't worry, I'm a great teacher. First lesson, never interrupt a man during karaoke night." Ciena's laugh was soft, almost musical. "I'll keep that in mind." For the first time in what felt like days, Anders felt a little less alone. The base cafeteria wasn't built for quiet reflection. It was built for efficiency. Long utilitarian tables, dull steel walls lined with nutrition dispensers, and the constant hum of machinery. Conversations were a mix of half-shouted orders, laughter, and the occasional argument over the best way to survive a plasma grenade explosion. Anders sat at his usual spot, a tray of something vaguely resembling curry in front of him. Across the table, Kim was in the middle of his latest monologue about why anti-grav bikes were the superior form of transportation. "I'm just saying, if you don't feel like you might throw up, are you even going fast enough?" Kim argued, gesturing with a spoonful of mashed protein. Anders barely registered the comment. His mind was still on the conversation with Ciena from the night before. Every time he tried to focus on something else, like Kim's increasingly unhinged theories about speed, it looped back around to the same place, his father. "Earth to Anders," Kim said, waving a hand in front of his face. "You look like someone just told you karaoke night's been canceled." Anders blinked, shaking himself out of his thoughts. "Sorry, what were you saying?" Kim narrowed his eyes. "I said anti-grav bikes are the pinnacle of human engineering, and you said, nothing. That's suspicious. Are you feeling okay? No sudden urge to admit you're secretly a Nornex spy?" Anders smirked despite himself. "You caught me. My plan was to infiltrate the military and spend years working my way up just to sabotage the coffee machines." "Diabolical," Kim said, grinning. "But seriously, you good? You've been acting weird since—" He glanced around and lowered his voice. "Since Ciena showed up." Anders sighed, pushing his tray aside. "Yeah, well, turns out it's hard to focus on lunch when someone casually drops that your dad was a galactic war hero." Kim's eyebrows shot up. "Wait, seriously? She said that?" "Apparently, he fought with her against the Nornex 20-something years ago." Anders leaned back in his chair. "She even claimed he carried a photo of me the whole time. The whole thing feels like a bad holodrama." Kim whistled. "Man, that's intense. Did you know he was in the military?" "Sort of," Anders admitted. "I mean, I knew he was an engineer, but I didn't think he was out there fighting aliens. He never talked about it." Kim shrugged. "Sounds like he had his reasons." "Parents always have layers, man. Like onions, or parfaits, if you're feeling fancy." Before Anders could respond, a shadow fell across the table. He looked up to see Ciena standing there, her expression as unreadable as ever. "Do you mind if I join you?" she asked. Anders exchanged a glance with Kim, who gave him a thumbs up under the table, clearly delighted by the awkwardness of the situation. "Sure," Anders said, gesturing to the empty seat across from him. "Why not?" Ciena sat down, her movements precise. She eyed the tray in front of Anders. Is that food? That's a generous description, Anders said, but yeah, it's technically edible. Sienna tilted her head, studying the tray like it might suddenly come alive. Humans have strange tastes. Kim snorted. Says the species that eats glowing mushrooms for breakfast. They're highly nutritious, Sienna replied without missing a beat. And they don't resemble whatever that is. Anders chuckled. Trust me, you're not missing much. So what brings you to the cafeteria, besides critiquing our culinary choices? I wanted to discuss something with you, Sienna said. In private, if possible. Kim made a mock gasp, placing a hand over his heart. Am I being dismissed? Betrayed by my own bunkmate? Pretty much, Anders said, smirking. Kim stood up, grabbing his tray. Fine, but if you need me, I'll be over there, plotting my next great anti-grav bike adventure. Don't keep secrets, Anders. They fester. Anders rolled his eyes as Kim walked away, then turned back to Sienna. All right, you've got my attention. What's on your mind? Sienna leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice. There's something you need to see. Anders frowned. That's not ominous at all. It's about your father, she said. About the mission. The room Sienna led him to wasn't on any of the base's standard maps. It was tucked away in an older section of the station, the walls lined with aging consoles and flickering holodisplays. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and the hum of machinery was louder here, vibrating through the floor. What is this place? Anders asked, looking around. A communications hub, Sienna replied. It's no longer in use, but it serves my purposes. Your purposes? You really know how to make a guy feel at ease. Sienna ignored his comment, moving to one of the consoles. She tapped a series of commands into the interface, and a holographic image flickered to life in the air between them. Anders stepped closer, his breath catching as he recognized the figure in the image. It was his father. The hologram showed a man in his late 30s, wearing a battle-worn uniform. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were bright with determination. In his hands, he held a folded piece of paper, the photo, Anders realized. The hologram crackled and his father's voice filled the room. This is Doran Anders, recording what might be my last message. If you're seeing this, well, I guess I didn't make it back. Anders froze, his heart pounding. I don't have much time, the hologram continued. The mission's gone sideways, and the odds aren't in our favor. But if I don't make it, I want my son to know I did this for him, for Anders. I wanted him to have a future, to grow up in a galaxy where he didn't have to fight for every scrap of peace. The hologram flickered again, and Anders could see the strain in his father's expression. Sienna, if you're the one delivering this, thank you. And if you ever find my son, tell him. The message cut off abruptly, the image dissolving into static. Anders stared at the empty space where the hologram had been, his mind racing. I found this in the aftermath of the battle, Sienna said softly. I kept it, hoping one day I might fulfill his request. Anders let out a shaky laugh. This is a lot to process. Sienna nodded. Take your time. The truth is often difficult, but it is necessary. Anders ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts a chaotic swirl. But beneath the confusion, there was something else, a sense of connection, however faint, to the father he thought he'd lost forever. Well, he said, forcing a grin, if Dad wanted me to have a future, he'd probably be thrilled to know I'm stuck eating cafeteria slop and dodging alien ambushes. Sienna's lips twitched. He would likely appreciate your sense of humor. Anders chuckled, despite the lump in his throat. Yeah, let's go with that. For the first time in years, Anders felt like he wasn't walking alone. The next morning, Anders woke up to the familiar blare of the ship's alarm. The tone wasn't particularly soothing, somewhere between a dying cat and a malfunctioning klaxon, but after years in the military, Anders could sleep through just about anything. Well, almost anything. Anders, get your lazy ass out of bed. Kim's voice cut through the barracks like a laser saw. Anders groaned and threw a pillow in the general direction of the voice. 5 more minutes, he mumbled, face buried in his mattress. You've got 5 seconds before I start singing Galactic Funk Anthem at full volume, Kim threatened. Anders shot up like he'd been electrocuted. You win! I'm up! Kim grinned triumphantly from his bunk. That's what I thought. You can't hide from the funk, my friend. Anders muttered something incoherent as he pulled on his uniform. His thoughts were still clouded by the events of the previous day. Siena's revelation, the hologram of his father, the impossible weight of it all. But there wasn't much time to dwell on it. The squad had a briefing in 15 minutes, and Anders was pretty sure the commander wouldn't take existential crisis as an excuse for being late. And the briefing room was as sterile and uninviting as ever, with its dim lighting and uncomfortable chairs. Commander Rourke stood at the front, a hulking figure with a permanent scowl etched into his face. He looked like he chewed on starship hulls for breakfast. "Listen up," Rourke barked, his gravelly voice cutting through the murmurs of the assembled soldiers. "We've got a situation on the outer rim of this sector. A research outpost on Luminara 7 went dark 2 days ago. No distress signals, no comms, nothing." Anders exchanged a glance with Kim, who raised an eyebrow. Rourke continued, gesturing to a holographic display that lit up with an image of a lush green planet. "Luminara 7 is home to some of the best minds in the galaxy. They were working on experimental tech, classified stuff. Whatever happened out there, it's our job to find out and bring them back." "Sounds like a cakewalk," Kim muttered under his breath. "Private Kim," Rourke snapped, his eyes locking onto Kim like a targeting laser. "Do you have something to add?" Kim grinned sheepishly. "Just wondering if there'll be snacks, sir." The room erupted into muffled laughter, and even Anders couldn't help but chuckle. Rourke's scowl deepened. "I'll make sure to pack you a juice box, Private. Now shut up and listen." Kim leaned over to Anders, whispering, "Totally worth it." By the time they arrived at Luminara 7, the mood had shifted from playful to tense. The planet loomed outside the viewport, its emerald surface dotted with swirling clouds. Anders sat in the dropship, his hands gripping the safety harness as they descended through the atmosphere. Across from him, Sienna was quiet, her gaze focused on the distant horizon. "You've been here before?" Anders asked, breaking the silence. "Yes," she said, briefly. "My people have little interest in planets like this." "Too green for you?" "Too quiet," she replied. "Silence often hides danger." Kim, sitting beside Anders, leaned in. "So what you're saying is, we're flying into a death trap?" Sienna didn't respond, but her silence was answer enough. "Great," Kim said, sinking back into his seat. "I love death traps." The outpost was eerily quiet when they landed. The structure was a sleek, modular design, its silvery walls reflecting the surrounding jungle. There were no signs of life, no lights, no movement, nothing. "Stay sharp," Rourke ordered, as the squad fanned out. Anders followed Kim and Sienna toward the main entrance. The doors were sealed, but Kim made quick work of the control panel, muttering, "Piece of cake," as the locks disengaged. The interior was just as unsettling as the exterior. The lights flickered sporadically, casting long shadows across the walls. Equipment lay scattered across the floor, and there were scorch marks near the central console. "Well, this isn't ominous," Anders said, his voice echoing slightly. "Understatement of the year," Kim replied. As they moved deeper into the facility, Anders couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The air was thick with tension, and every sound seemed amplified. The hum of their equipment, the crunch of boots on the floor, the faint buzz of distant machinery. They reached what appeared to be the main lab. Sienna paused at the doorway, her expression unreadable. "What is it?" Anders asked. "This technology," she said, gesturing to the consoles and equipment. "It's unusual." "Unusual how?" Kim asked. "Like, gonna explode in our faces unusual?" Sienna didn't answer immediately. She moved to one of the consoles, her fingers brushing over the controls. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of complex diagrams and equations. "This," she said, pointing to the display, "is not human in origin." Anders frowned. "What are you saying? That the researchers were working with alien tech?" "Or trying to reverse engineer it," Sienna said. "Poorly." Kim let out a low whistle. "Well, that explains the scorch marks." Before anyone could respond, a loud crash echoed through the facility. The team froze, weapons raised as the sound reverberated through the halls. "What the hell was that?" Anders whispered. Rourke's voice crackled over the comms. "All units, report in. Something's moving in the lower levels." Anders' heart pounded as they moved cautiously toward the source of the noise. The corridor was narrow, the walls closing in around them as they descended a staircase into the sub-level. The room they entered was massive, filled with towering machines and glowing conduits. In the center stood a containment unit, its transparent walls cracked and splattered with an unidentifiable black substance. "Well, that's not terrifying," Kim said. Ciena's eyes narrowed as she approached the unit. This containment field, it was meant to hold something powerful, something unstable. "Like what?" Anders asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted an answer. Before Ciena could respond, a deep guttural growl echoed through the room. The team turned as one, their weapons trained on the shadows. Guys," Kim said, his voice trembling slightly. "I think we found what broke out." From the darkness emerged a hulking figure, its body covered in sleek metallic plating that seemed to shift and shimmer with every step. Its eyes glowed a piercing blue, and when it opened its mouth, rows of jagged teeth glinted in the dim light. Anders swallowed hard. "So, does anyone have a plan?" Kim raised his hand. "I vote we run." The creature let out an ear-splitting roar, and all hell broke loose. Anders barely had time to register the roar before the creature charged. The ground beneath their feet trembled as it barreled toward them, its glowing eyes locked on their group like a predator zeroing in on prey. "Scatter!" Rourke bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos. The squad dove in different directions as the beast swiped with an enormous claw, carving a deep groove into the metal floor. Anders hit the ground hard, rolling to avoid a second strike. His pulse was racing, and his weapon felt woefully inadequate against the hulking metallic monstrosity. "Please tell me someone packed the blow-up-everything gun," Kim shouted from behind a console, his voice tinged with panic. "Working on it," Rourke growled, firing a few rounds that barely scratched the creature's shimmering armor. Anders ducked behind a support pillar, his mind racing. "Ciena, any ideas? You seem to know a lot about alien tech." Ciena, crouched near a damaged terminal, didn't look up. "This is not technology. It's biology enhanced with technology. A hybrid construct." "Great," Anders muttered. "So it's basically a really angry cyborg tiger?" Ciena tilted her head, considering. A crude analogy, but not inaccurate. The beast let out another deafening roar, swinging its tail into a stack of machinery. Sparks flew as the equipment shattered, the sound of tearing metal echoing through the room. Kim popped up from his hiding spot long enough to fire a few rounds. "You know, I'm starting to think we should have stayed in the cafeteria. At least there, the worst threat was the curry." "Focus, Private," Rourke snapped, but even his voice carried a hint of strain. The creature's movements were almost hypnotic, its metallic plating shifting and shimmering like liquid as it absorbed incoming fire. Anders fired a burst from his rifle, aiming for what looked like a joint in its armor, but the bullets ricocheted harmlessly. "This isn't working," Anders shouted. Ciena stood suddenly, her eyes fixed on the containment unit they'd found earlier. The containment field, it was designed to neutralize this creature. If we can repair it— "Repair it?" Kim interrupted. "Have you seen the state of that thing? It looks like it's been through a black hole." "Then we must improvise," Ciena said firmly, moving toward the damaged unit. Anders cursed under his breath and followed her. "Improvising usually ends with me getting yelled at or blown up, but sure, let's go with your plan." As the two of them reached the containment unit, Ciena began working on the control panel, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "What exactly are we improvising here?" Anders asked, his voice tight. "The field can still be activated," Ciena said. "But its power source is depleted. We'll need to redirect energy from the facility's main grid." "And how do we do that without getting eaten?" Ciena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she glanced at Anders, her expression oddly calm. "You distract it, I'll handle the grid." Anders blinked. "I distract it? With what? Harsh language?" Kim's voice crackled over the comms. "I vote dance moves. Nothing confuses a predator like bad choreography." "I hate you both," Anders muttered. Anders took a deep breath, gripping his rifle tightly as he stepped out from behind cover. The creature's glowing eyes immediately locked onto him, and it let out a low growl that vibrated in his chest. "Hey, big guy!" Anders shouted, his voice echoing in the cavernous room. "Over here! Yeah, that's right, I'm talking to you!" The beast hesitated for a moment, as if confused by the sudden boldness. Then it charged. Oh crap, oh crap, oh crap. Anders turned and ran, weaving between the scattered debris as the creature gave chase. Its heavy footsteps thundered behind him, each one sending a jolt through the floor. Kim's voice crackled in his ear. You're doing great, buddy. Real hero stuff. Shut up, Kim. Anders snapped, narrowly avoiding a swipe from the creature's claws. Meanwhile, Sienna worked quickly, her focus unshaken despite the chaos around her. The console in front of her sparked as she rerouted power, the screen flickering with warning messages in a dozen different languages. Sienna, Anders panted over the comms. Anytime you're ready. Almost there, she replied, her tone steady. The creature roared again, this time swinging its tail in a wide arc. Anders dove to the ground, the tail missing him by inches and slamming into a wall instead. Definitely going to need a chiropractor after this, he muttered, scrambling to his feet. Finally, Sienna stepped back from the console, a faint glow surrounding the containment unit as the field began to power up. It's ready, she called out. Great, Anders shouted. Now how do we get it in there? Sienna didn't answer, at least not with words. Instead, she picked up a small device from the console and threw it toward the creature. The device emitted a high-pitched whine that made Anders' teeth ache. The beast froze, its head snapping toward the sound. Then, slowly, it began moving toward the containment unit, as if drawn by an invisible force. Is that a dog whistle for cyborg tigers? Kim asked over the comms. Essentially, Sienna replied. As the creature stepped into the containment unit, Sienna activated the controls. The field flared to life, surrounding the beast in a shimmering barrier of light. It roared in frustration, slamming against the walls of its prison, but the field held. Anders let out a shaky laugh, collapsing against a nearby console. Well, that was fun. Let's never do it again. Kim emerged from his hiding spot, grinning. I don't know. I think we made a pretty good team. You distract. I provide moral support. Sienna saves the day. Classic trio dynamics. Rourke's voice crackled over the comms. Good work, team. Let's secure the area and figure out what the hell that thing was. Anders glanced at Sienna, who was studying the creature with a thoughtful expression. Any guesses? He asked. Many, she said, none of them comforting. Kim clapped a hand on Anders's shoulder. Cheer up, man. At least you didn't die horribly. That's a win in my book. Anders chuckled, despite himself. Yeah, I guess it is. As they began packing up, Anders couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. Whatever secrets Luminara 7 held, they were far from uncovered. And he had a sinking suspicion that his father's past was somehow tangled in it all. The containment unit hummed softly, a strange counterpoint to the lingering tension in the room. The cyborg beast was subdued, its glowing eyes dim, but still watching them from within its shimmering prison. Anders leaned against a console, feeling the weight of exhaustion settle over him. Every muscle ached, his uniform was torn in a dozen places, and he was pretty sure he had a bruise forming on his left kidney. But they were alive. Somehow. All right, Kim said, breaking the silence. So who gets to explain this mess to command? Because I vote not me. Rourke's scowl deepened, which was impressive given his usual baseline. Nobody's explaining anything until we know what the hell this thing is. He pointed to Sienna. And you, alien lady, start talking. What do you know? Sienna didn't bristle at the demand. Instead, she remained calm, her gaze fixed on the creature as if seeing something the rest of them couldn't. This hybrid is a byproduct of ancient technology, not of my people, but from those who came before. Came before? Anders asked, frowning. The architects, Sienna said, her voice soft, almost reverent. An extinct species that once spanned the galaxy. They were masters of creation, melding biology and technology in ways that even we cannot replicate. This creature is their remnant, a guardian perhaps, or a weapon left unfinished. Kim tilted his head. So, we're dealing with a superweapon from a race of super nerds who are super dead? Rourke shot him a glare. Private. Just trying to lighten the mood, sir, Kim said with a grin. As they secured the area, Anders felt the pull of the hologram room. He didn't know why. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe he just needed answers to the questions still swirling in his mind. He found himself standing in front of the console once again, staring at the blank space where his father's image had appeared. Sienna joined him, her presence quiet but grounding. You seek more answers? Anders nodded. It's just hard to believe. My dad, working on alien tech? And now all this. He gestured to the room around them. It doesn't make sense. Perhaps, Sienna said, it is not about understanding everything. Perhaps it is about what you choose to do with what you've learned. Before Anders could respond, the console flickered to life. Sienna stepped forward, her fingers brushing over the controls. The hologram reappeared, not his father this time, but a map of the galaxy dotted with glowing points of light. What is this? Anders asked. Coordinates, Sienna said, her voice filled with quiet wonder. Locations of other remnants. Kim's voice crackled over the comms. Hey, guys, we've got company topside. Like, a lot of company. When Anders and Sienna emerged from the lab, they were greeted by the sight of sleek, angular ships descending through the jungle canopy. Their hulls shimmered like liquid, and their weapons bristled with alien menace. Well, Kim said, standing beside Rourke, this just keeps getting better and better. Sienna's expression darkened. They are not of my people. Who are they? Anders asked. Raiders, she said. Collectors of ancient technology. They will not leave without the hybrid. Guess they're going to be disappointed then, Rourke said, cocking his weapon. Everyone, prepare to defend the outpost. The battle that followed was chaos. The raiders were fast, their weapons strange and deadly, but the squad held their ground. Sienna fought alongside them, her movements fluid and precise, her energy weapon cutting through their ranks with ease. Anders found himself in the thick of it, his rifle blazing as he covered Kim, who was trying to rig up a trap using some of the outpost's damaged equipment. Tell me this is going to work, Anders shouted over the din. Define work, Kim replied, sweat dripping down his face. I'm going to kill you if we survive this. Fair enough. The trap, an improvised electromagnetic pulse, detonated moments later, sending a surge of energy rippling through the air. The raiders' ships faltered, their shimmering hulls flickering like static, before crashing into the jungle. The remaining raiders fled, their retreat as swift as their arrival. In the aftermath, the team regrouped. Rourke barked orders to secure the area and prepare for extraction, but Anders' focus was on Sienna. You knew this would happen, he said. Sienna met his gaze, her expression unreadable. I suspected. The architect's technology draws those who would misuse it. It is why it was hidden. And now it's not hidden anymore, Anders said. No, she agreed. But perhaps it is better this way. Anders frowned. How do you figure? Sienna placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch surprisingly gentle. Because you, Anders, are not your father. You can choose a different path. As the team prepared to leave, Anders stood on the edge of the clearing, watching the jungle sway in the breeze. Kim joined him, a grin on his face despite the scratches and bruises covering him. You okay, buddy? Kim asked. Anders nodded. Yeah, I think I am. Kim clapped him on the back. Good, because after this, I'm cashing in all my leave for a vacation. Somewhere with no aliens, no ancient tech, and no life or death situations. You in? Anders chuckled. Sounds perfect. Back aboard the ship, Anders found himself staring out the viewport as the planet shrank into the distance. Sienna approached, her presence quiet as always. Thank you, he said, surprising himself. For what? For helping me. Understand. My dad, this place, everything. Sienna tilted her head. And what have you learned? Anders thought for a moment before replying. That the past doesn't define me. I get to choose who I am. And maybe I'm not so bad at this hero thing after all. Sienna smiled faintly. You have potential, Anders. Perhaps more than you realize. As the stars stretched into lines and the ship jumped to hyperspace, Anders felt a strange sense of peace. The journey wasn't over.